And we are live. What's up?
What's up, brother? What's up?
How are you?
Greetings from New York.
How much I call you? Porcell? You like it? Or
you can call me,
Paramananda?
you can call me Porcell because you're probably more familiar with that, and everybody always messes up Paramananda.
Paramananda.
So yeah, you can just call me Porcell. That's fine.
And what it means, Paramananda? Sorry.
It means supreme in Sanskrit. Para means supreme or the greatest.
Yes.
And Ananda means bliss. So it means supremely blissful.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It was interesting because when I got initiated, I got initiated into a yoga line, bhakti yoga line. And my guru gave me that name when I got initiated, and he said, "Your name is Paramananda, supremely blissful." And everybody cheered and everybody clapped. And after the cheering kind of died down, he said, Your name is Paramananda Das. So Das means servant. So Paramananda.
So he take you to the limit, and then he.
Yeah, because I think because everybody clapped.
Yes.
When you're getting initiated into one of these, bhakti yoga traditions, it's so kind of against what it's all about to have people clap for you.
Yeah.
Because
it's not about your ego. It's more
it's
about
not exactly. It's not supposed to feed the ego. It's supposed to be a tradition where you take yourself out of the center and you put Krishna or God in the center.
Sure.
So there was all these Shelter was a big band when I got initiated. So there was all these hardcore kids that just came because they just kind of wanted to see what I was up to. And so when he gave me the name, everybody clapped and everybody was going like this. It was almost like a show. And I looked at my guru and he looked at me, and we both understood it like, this isn't what it's all about. You know what I mean? It's not about people clapping for me.
Just calm down.
Yeah. So I think for my benefit and also for the benefit of everybody else, he said, "Your name is Paramananda, supremely blissful." And everybody clapped. And then after the clapping died down, he said, your name is Paramananda Das. And he said, Das means servant. So you're the servant of Krishna, who's the supremely blissful one and gives bliss to everybody. So he said, your job is to make other people supremely blissful.
Yeah.
And I really took that as a really deep instruction that, when you're in one of these bhakti yoga traditions, it's not about what I can get, it's about what I can give.
Yes.
And so
I always found so beautiful about that kind of, but I don't know if you can call it religion or philosophy.
Yeah.
The Bhagavad Gita, everything about it is great. I'm not a devotee. No, how you say it?
Yeah, devotee.
Yeah, a devotee. But I spent years with friends that really teach me a little bit about the philosophy, and it's so different to other kind of, I don't know, religions. For example, the Catholic Church is the complete opposite. It's like, but
when I grew up, I was a punk rocker, and probably one of my favorite bands was the Dead Kennedys. And so I was very wary about religions. And I think the word religion, these days has very bad connotations of it. People always think of religion. They think of people trying to control you. They think of people trying to take advantage of you. They think of, people trying to get money out of you. And it's true. Like, in the name of religion, so many bad things have happened. So many wars have happened over the years. Sure. So I don't even really like to use the word religion because it comes with such emotional baggage for people.
Yeah,
it's usually bad. It's usually bad. But actually the word religion, it means the exact same thing as yoga. Actually, yoga means to connect. The word in Sanskrit yoga, the English word yoke comes from the word yoga. So yoke is like when you take oxen and you connect them to the plow. You yoke them. So it has to do with uniting the soul with its source. And the word religion comes from the word religio, and like a ligament in the body connects. I think it's muscle to bone or bone to bone. I'm not exactly sure, but a ligament is also something that connects. So the word religion means to reconnect. It's the exact same word as yoga. But for some reason, when you use the word yoga, people don't freak out. When you use the word religion, they get a little bent because of their bad experiences.
But yoga is a Sanskrit word.
Yes, yoga is a Sanskrit word.
So it's way older than religion.
Yeah, no? Sanskrit is
the more oldest.
Sanskrit's the oldest religion. I mean, if you ask any linguistic scholar, they'll say that. And a lot of European and American, and I'm sure South American words directly come from Sanskrit. So to learn Sanskrit is such a complicated language. If you want to study Spanish, say I want to study Spanish,
yes,
I can learn Spanish in a year. You know what I mean? And speak it pretty well. If you want to learn Sanskrit, it takes 12 years of intense study to really understand Sanskrit, because it's just such a refined language. And they say these linguistic scholars, they say that you can understand a lot about a culture by how refined their language is. So you can imagine you had this culture in India 5,000 years ago that was so refined. And I'm just really very.
No, I completely agree. It's the same. For example, I came from Chile, but I live in France now.
Are you in France right now?
Yeah. I live in a city called Rennes. And learn French is so. I'm still learning because it's such a complex language. So, but of course, I had the chance to try to understand the Bhagavad Gita, and it's like from another planet.
Yeah, it's actually the Sanskrit in the Bhagavad Gita is very, very basic. Like if you take a first year Sanskrit class in college, you'll study the Bhagavad Gita because the Sanskrit is actually very, very simple. And once you kind of I don't really know, I'm not like a Sanskrit scholar, but I, just from, studying all this stuff for, years and years and years, I do have a pretty good vocabulary in Sanskrit. And I could just look at at this point, I could just look at the Sanskrit in the Bhagavad Gita, and I could translate the verse pretty much, not for every verse, but for all the major verses. I could just see the Sanskrit and just understand what the English transliteration is just from looking at the Sanskrit. Just because it's very, very simple. You get into more things like the Upanishads and some of these more complicated Sanskrit mantras. It's very, very, very complicated. But I think that's the glory of the Bhagavad Gita is it's spoken very, very simply. It gives like the basics of spirituality. If you're just a kind of a lay person and you pick up the Bhagavad Gita and you try to read it, it's a little tricky to understand. Yes. But if you have somebody that understands the Bhagavad Gita, you could learn it pretty well in a month. So
well, I don't know a month, but I believe it.
I remember when I first started going to India, when I first joined Shelter. Shelter, we would never. When we first started, we all lived in the temple, and so we were what's called brahmacharis. So brahmachari means basically you're like a monk living in the temple. You're living very simply. You don't really have any possessions. Like for years, I didn't have any personal possessions.
In an ashram?
In an ashram, yeah. I lived in an ashram in Philadelphia. That's where Shelter started, and that's actually where Equal Vision Records started too. The band used to run the record label out of the ashram there in Philadelphia.
Oh, that's great. But before continuing, I would like to, if you can, I don't know, introduce yourself a little bit to my audience, because they are not all hardcore guys or or Krishna guys. So
Okay.
it's kind of, but I think it's cool because it makes them, discover your music, your ideas, and for me, I love it. It's part of, but for me, I don't know, the hardcore culture, straight edge, vegetarianism, yoga is kind of a part of my life. So it will be great if you can, make a little introduction of yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is, mostly people know me by the name Porcell. My name is actually John Porcelly, but people call, in the hardcore scene, it was kind of my nickname to call me Porcell. And so when I was young, I was in a bunch of hardcore bands, Youth of Today, Judge. Later on, I was in a band called Shelter. I did other bands like Project X, and I was in Gorilla Biscuits for a little bit and Bold for a little bit. So a lot of these bands that I started when I was 18, like really like a teenager, they went on to become kind of like seminal hardcore bands, and especially seminal straight edge bands. Straight edge was if you don't know, straight edge was a kind of sub scene in the hardcore scene that where people didn't do drugs, they didn't smoke, they didn't drink. A lot of them were vegetarian. A lot of them were into environmentalism and activism in in that department. And so over the years, as the straight edge scene went global and the internet happened, and a lot of kids these days that are just getting into straight edge, it's
popular. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
because I'm sure when you started was like, was a very, but I don't know if it's little, but like you say, was a part of hardcore, and now it's kind of huge. You can find straight edge bands all over the world, and it became a concept that most of people can understand.
I mean, the word straight edge is now in the dictionary. It's
really?
it's in the Webster dictionary, which is like the main dictionary in America. So it's pretty amazing because when I got into straight edge in high school, nobody was straight edge. Straight edge was, Minor Threat was this band that had a song named Straight Edge, if you're not familiar with Minor Threat.
Yeah.
And they kind of coined the term, and they kind of introduced the hardcore scene to just even the philosophy that you could still be into punk and you could be like a wild, rebellious person, but not drink or not do drugs. As a matter of fact, if you didn't drink and you didn't do drugs, you were the ultimate rebel. Because I tell you, when I first was going to hardcore, a lot of these people in the hardcore scene and in the punk scene, they wanted to be rebels and outsiders, and they didn't want to be mainstream. But what were they doing? They're getting drunk. They were getting in fights. They were doing all the lame crap that kids did in my high school. So although they were in different clothes and although they had mohawks and spikes and purple hair, if you really looked at their life, they weren't really doing much different than your average jock at school. And so that was one of the things that really attracted to me about straight edge, because it was a rebellion against how the mainstream culture of America was moving, the party culture, the drug culture. And, at least when I was young, it was so all pervasive in school. Like if you wanted to be cool in school, you had to smoke pot, you had to do drugs, you had to do coke, because that's what all the cool kids did. And so when I got into straight edge, for me, it was like a really deep, rebellious thing. It still is, I think.
Of course.
And
but when you start, I don't know, actually before become part of straight edge culture, you try some stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I used to party pretty hard. I mean, I got out of it very early, but I went to a kind of upper middle class, kind of rich kid school. It wasn't a private school, it was a public school, but it was a very rich area in the suburbs of New York City. And it was a big party school, huge party school. Every single weekend there was parties. And I played football. I was on the football team. And so, you know, if you were on the football team, usually you were, you know, sort of a popular kid in school or whatever. You were like a jock and you were cool. And so it was just a given that if you were a jock and you were a cool kid in the school, what you did on the weekends was you partied hard, and that's what was cool. And dude, we got so wasted this weekend, you know, high five. And
but there was a lot of peer pressure.
Tons. I mean, you were that's what you were expected to do with your peer group. And you know, really the only kids in my school that didn't drink or didn't go to parties, they were like what was considered like the nerds in the school. You know, the kids that were just like, you know, unpopular, very antisocial, never went to parties, never talked to anybody, you know. So it was expected that if you were sort of a social person that was, you know, whatever, that was like higher up on the social ladder for whatever that
but for me, it's amazing the kind of pressure that put in young people in every generation. There's always there. You have to drink. You have to get wasted. You know, just to fit in. You know,
huge amount of pressure, and actually, a lot of it is just to fit in. It's exactly what you're saying.
Yes,
and I think I was one of those people because I never really, quite honestly, I never really liked drinking. I hated being hungover, and you know, when you're like a 14-year-old kid drinking Jack Daniels at a party. I mean, I remember one time I went to a party and it was the first time that I drank vodka. One of my friends had a bottle of vodka and they were mixing vodka and orange juice. You know, they're mixing screwdrivers. Yes. And so it was the first time that I drank vodka. And, you know, because you're putting in an orange juice, I'm just like pounding these.
Yeah, because you don't feel the alcohol.
Yeah. And, you know, you can imagine I'm 14. I probably weigh, I don't know, 100 pounds. I mean, I was like a skinny 14-year-old kid. I was so hungover the next day. I swear to God, I was hungover for 2 days. I was hungover for about 48 hours. I was throwing up in bed. I mean, I had alcohol poisoning.
And actually, alcohol is a poison.
Yeah.
It's not good for you, actually.
It's not good for you at all. And I was in bed for 2 days, nauseous and sick. And the whole time I was just thinking, like, why did I do that to myself? This is ridiculous.
It's crazy.
But, you know, so I think I always had that mindset that if I had a choice, I wouldn't do it. But I want to fit in at school and I want to be a cool kid in school. So I'm just going to do it.
And on that time, you were listening what music?
I was listening to punk rock. I got into punk when I was probably like 12. And I got so upset. I got so obsessed with punk. It was just from the time I was 12, pretty much till now.
And there was a reason in particular that you feel attracted by punk?
I don't know what it was.
Because I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. It happened to some friends or myself when you're, I don't know, with your family is kind of very strict, or I don't know, but it could be different reasons, you know, that maybe.
I am really not sure exactly what it was. I just heard all those early punk bands like Sex Pistols, or Ramones, The Clash, you know, X-Ray Specs, and for some reason, that music just reached out and grabbed me by the throat and pulled me in. I don't know what it was, but like, you know, I basically heard the Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks. I heard the Ramones first record, and I heard the Clash first record. And I was like, this is it. This is like the music that I love. And it just grabbed me. I don't know. I'm, you know, maybe I was a screwed up kid. I think it.
No, but I don't know if you were a screw up, but sometimes it's like you it's like when you can conform with what society offer you.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of that.
When you see already your path is already fixed for you.
Yeah.
Especially if you say that you came from a middle high class.
Yeah, I did. Maybe that was it, because I don't know. It's strange because I got into it so young. I think I went from elementary school to junior high school, and that's a time where you're young, but you're not that young. You're like 11, you're 12, you're 13.
Yes.
It's around that time where you're not a kid anymore, and you're about to become a teenager.
Yes.
And you're really just kind of searching for yourself. You're searching for, where do I fit in? Who's the type of person that I want to be? What kind of friends do I want to have?
Yeah.
And it was just during that time that I heard that music, and it just spoke to me. I don't really know it. I was always like I was a nutty, aggressive, very energetic, too energetic kid. I was very like a hyper kid. And I think that had a lot to do with it, but it was even like the lyrics and just the rebelliousness about it that I don't know, I just loved it. And
now they're great.
From the time I was 12, I heard this kind of music and I was like, this is it. Like, I don't want to hear AC/DC anymore. I don't want to listen to Led Zeppelin. Screw Rush. Screw it all. That music is...
Wait. You were listening to that before?
A little bit.
Okay.
I mostly listened to Kiss. I love that band, Kiss.
Okay.
Just because they were so outrageous. And every kid from my generation loved Kiss because, they would breathe fire and spit blood.
Yeah, they were almost like superheroes.
Yeah, exactly.
With the makeup and everything.
Yeah. So when you're like 10 years old, Kiss is just the best band you've ever heard.
Yeah.
But I always loved music, and I think after Kiss, I was really kind of searching for, okay, I'm not into Kiss anymore. They're kind of like, I just sort of grew out of them. So what's the kind of music that I want to get into? And my brother was into all that kind of rock music, like Zeppelin.
Okay.
And he loved AC/DC and Ozzy. And so, I used to listen to that stuff. And I actually really liked the music itself. Like, I thought the music was kind of, hard and fast and energetic. And I liked that about it. But once I heard punk, all that music just seemed stupid to me. Just the lyrics were so stupid. You listen to punk, and they actually had something to say. They had something to say about the state of society or what they liked and what they didn't like. They were talking about real things and real.
We were looking for something else.
Yeah,
it was not enough because for some people it's just enough. Just the music.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin would talk about fairies and this and different kind of worlds, and AC/DC just talked about a bunch of dumb shit. But you listen to the Clash, and wow, they were actually saying they actually had a lot to say.
Yeah, of course.
The lyrics were very thoughtful, and I don't know, it just really got to me.
Yeah, well, for me, it was kind of the opposite because I grew up listening to rock and metal, and I grew up on that culture, and it's kind of a toxic culture because you have to drink, you have to smoke, you have to don't be a pussy,
Yeah.
And well, I was fan of Slayer, Metallica were not very popular, and a bunch of metal bands, Sepultura, whatever. And then I found someone that I was thinking was a metalhead like me. And he said, "No, man, I'm a straight edge." I said, "What was that?" He said, No, I love Slayer, but there another band like Strive, Gorilla Biscuits, Judge." He started to talk to me about bands and then show me some vinyls and stuff and make me listen and say, "But what the fuck? So you can do some very hardcore music, very intense music, but you don't drink, you don't smoke. What the fuck?"
It's mind blowing.
Yeah, for me, it was really mind blowing, and it helped me a lot in my life to really have kind of, I don't know, be more. I don't know, because when you are into that kind of metal scene, everyone do the same, everyone talk the same, and have another, give you perspective, you know. Yeah. What really alcohol is, what really, and especially, you know, the like you were saying, you know, was peer pressure and everything. But for me, what really grabbed my attention, when he was saying, no, you are against how our society functions, the injustice and everything. So you need to be awake. You can't be, you know, toned down by drugs, by alcohol. You know, if you don't want the politician fool you, you need to be awake, man. And I was like, yeah. It's like, yeah, it was because I don't know, maybe there's a lot of, well, no, not a lot. Some people that get attracted to straight edge to just feel special. But I don't think that's the good reason. For me, the good reason is like what I was saying right now, to, you know, to be aware of things, to be, I don't know. If you really are not conform with society, you need something to change it. And to change it, you need to be awake.
Yeah. I mean, what attracted me to straight edge was, you know, especially there's that one line from the song Straight Edge. I'm a person just like you, but I've got better things to do. And really, in my life, I think I was a very ambitious person. And I didn't want to waste my time sitting at some party, getting drunk every weekend. Like, I had better things to do. I was way into music. I wanted to, you know, from an early age, I was doing bands and trying to, you know, start bands and, you know, play shows and things like that. And I just saw alcohol as, you know, at best, it was a huge distraction, you know, because it kind of just took all of your free time that you would have on the weekends, and you would just end up, you know, getting drunk and nursing a hangover the next day. And at worst, it was just like, it, you know, I could see it really can destroy people's lives. Yeah. I mean, if you know these people that, you know, that, you know, come from alcoholic backgrounds and they had alcoholic parents, or, you know, they were alcoholics themselves. What to speak of, you know, when I started first going to, you know, punk shows, and then it wasn't even just alcohol. It was drugs and heroin and meth and, you know, angel dust, and people were sniffing glue, and, you know,
good times.
It really destroys people. I mean, people turn into zombies. It ruins their lives. It takes away all their good qualities. And I always thought, like, why even do this? It just didn't really make much sense to me. And it was funny too, because, you know, you talk about fitting in, and when I first kind of told all my friends on the football team, like, hey, I'm straight edge now, I don't drink anymore, people were like, what? What? They were like, why? Why would you not drink? Well, like, why? And, you know, they would get angry at me, like, you should fucking drink.
Yeah, because you made question themselves.
Yeah. You know? It's almost like putting a mirror in front of yourself, because now, like, you have to, like, look at yourself and think of, is what I'm doing making sense? This person's not doing it. Yeah. And there was a huge, I mean, even my own father was like, what the hell? Why don't you drink? My own father, you know, I come from this Italian family and everybody's drinking wine, and
of course,
you know, and then, you know, I'm not doing that stuff, and, you know, they just couldn't wrap their heads around it. So, you know, but for me, you know, it was really great for me to do that, especially at a young, impressionable age. Yeah, because from a time that I was young, it sort of got soaked into me that I got to be my own person, and I'm not going to follow public opinion. And even if the mainstream doesn't approve of it, if it resonates with my heart, I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to care what other people think about it. I'm just going to find my own truth, and I'm going to pursue that. And I think because I did that when I was like 16 and I was very young, and it took a lot of kind of courage, especially in my school and in the punk scene at the time, where there was no straight edge scene. It was a very, very, very valuable tool that I put in my tool belt that I used for my whole entire life. Because a lot of people go through life just trying to please other people and just trying to fit in and just trying to kind of conform to the way mainstream society pushes you. And then they get to the end of their life and they think like, what did I do? I went to college, I got some crappy job that my parents expected me to get. I worked for 40 years and I just kind of made money, and I bought my condo and I bought my white picket fence, and like, why did I do that? Why? It didn't even make me happy, and I dedicated my whole entire life to it. So I think a lot of people get caught in that trap.
It's like living your life with an autopilot.
Yeah. And even when I wanted to get into yoga and bhakti yoga and Krishna, and I was into ashram, nowadays that stuff is kind of mainstream. I mean, yoga is huge. Sure. 25 years ago, yoga was a weird thing. And if you were doing yoga and you were into yoga and you were trying to find ashrams and living in ashrams, you were a freaking weirdo.
Yeah.
And luckily I had that background coming from straight edge and coming from punk rock where I didn't care. You think I'm a weirdo? I don't effing care. This stuff I find this stuff fascinating. And if I have to live into an ashram, if I have to move into the ashram and sell everything I own to learn this stuff, I'm more than happy to do it. And if that doesn't, if that doesn't kind of fit into your small mind, it's your problem. It's not mine. And believe me, I had to do that with my friends. I had to do that with my parents. I had to do that, with the hardcore scene.
There were some moments that were hard, a little harder in your life when you leave that change.
Yeah, for sure. It was tough to do. Yeah, even when I moved into a temple, my parents were super upset. They just couldn't understand why I was doing it, and partially I'm sure it's my fault that I didn't do such a great job of explaining what it was I was into. And but sometimes you just got to follow your heart.
Yeah, of course. No, that's great. And I always think that straight edge is a great example of like you say, courage and discipline. Because it's not easy. I'm sorry, but I'm not straight edge. I was for a couple of years, but I just
don't you look back at those years as something very valuable for you to reflect on, even for your whole life, even if you're not quote unquote straight edge anymore?
Of course,
I meet a lot of people who are from that.
A lot of perspective, about things, because especially because I was keeping my friends that were still drinking, and because they were my friends. I say, I don't need to drink to hang out with my friends. So I went to party with them, but I was just drinking juice or water or something. And
it's funny that you can have just as much fun and not drink. Mostly all you have to do is get people together. Like the magic happens when people just get together. You don't need the alcohol. You don't need like destructive things. People have you just throw 40 people in a room together. They're going to have a good time.
No, of course. But the weird thing happened when they start to drink a lot, and then start to laugh because of things that doesn't make any sense, And you're like, I don't know, like I don't understand.
And to me, it becomes a weird thing because a lot of people can't get social without getting drunk.
Yes.
And they just never learned. They just never
so
learned. They just never learned how to do it. They never learned how to, like. They need that alcohol to kind of come out of their shell a little bit. But
yeah,
you really don't. If you can just kind of practice and, you know, be with people and sort of open up to people without being blitzed out of your mind. You know,
yeah,
you don't need to do that. I think this just people have just kind of learned and use it as a crutch that, oh, for me to be able to relate to people and, you know, have a good time with people, that I have to get, you know, fucked up. And it's
yeah.
just
But
it's simply not true.
it's what we learn since we are little. You
Yeah.
know, you have fun. You need to do this. You know, it's like everything that we learn actually is already because your father did it, your grandfather did it. So it's like crazy normality.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, but
even from a young age, I hit the point. I think I was like 18, and I was just like, I don't want to do anything that's going to be destructive. I don't want to do things that are going to be destructive in my life. And I'm just going to, like, kind of try to identify what those things are, and then I'm going to cut them out of my life.
mm,
And, you know, so I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs. I think that led me to becoming a vegetarian, not eating
yeah.
meat. Not only is it bad for the
No, look
animal,
at you. You are what age? You have?
I'm 53,
Look,
and
it's crazy. You are
and
the best promotion for straight age
you,
ever.
you know, I'm really grateful that I got into this stuff when I was young,
Yes.
because, you know, I feel like, you know, I have good health. I have tons of energy. You know, I would go to these CrossFit classes. You know, I'd be doing better than kids that are half my age.
Yeah, of course.
You know, because I just haven't ravaged my body with drugs and alcohol for,
Yeah.
you know, for decades. And
Yeah.
I tell you, it takes its toll.
Yeah, of
Even
course.
if you're just a casual drinker or a casual, you know, smoker or whatever, it takes its toll after decades, and you can just
Yeah.
see it. And it's so unnecessary to see people that are like, you know, 40 years old, whatever. That's not old.
Yeah.
But, you know, but when you put that kind of constant strain of poisons into your body on a regular basis, year after year, you know, by the time you're 40 years old, you just become dismantled. And it's
Yeah.
so unnecessary. Like, I feel so grateful that I just kind of fell into that healthy lifestyle,
Yeah.
and it's really paid off. I think that, you know,
You look great.
you know, it's not even about like whatever. Like, look, it's just the way that you feel,
Yes.
and there's no price tag that you can put on that. You know,
No.
to feel healthy and energetic, and to, you know, to wake up and your body's not in pain, and, you know, you can
Sure.
still do all the things that you could do when you were 20. You know, I
Mm,
weigh the same that I did when I graduated high school.
that's
You know,
crazy.
I just kind of, you know, kept up with that.
Yeah.
And
No, for me, that's what for me is great that you accept my invitation, because for me you're the best example that, you know, you can make very hard music, you know, but you don't have to, like you say, poison your body, and you just need to have enough discipline and, I don't know, be smart enough to don't follow the lines. But not all the people are aware of that.
you know,
And
there's a great part of the Bhagavad Gita. You know, the Bhagavad Gita, it's not even like, I wouldn't even call it like a religious kind of book. It's more about a book that's just about truth and practical wisdom that you can apply to your life, and you can get a good result. Anybody can. Like, anybody can read the Bhagavad Gita and be like, you know, that makes a lot of sense. Let me try to apply that to my life, and apply it to your life and get a good result. It's universal truth, basically. It's not anything so crazy esoteric. It's really like one of these ABC books of spirituality. And, you know, there's a few Sanskrit verses in the Bhagavad Gita, and one of them says that activities that are like nectar in the beginning but turn to poison at the end, those activities should be taken out of your life. And then activities that are like poison in the beginning, but in the end turn to nectar. Those are the activities that you should invite into your life again and again. So when you think about that, you know, alcohol is such a great example of nectar in the beginning, and in the end it turns into poison. You know, you drink alcohol for a few hours or whatever, you're kind of like the life of the party, you got the lampshade on your head, you're feeling good. And then what happens? You know, it destroys your liver, you're hungover the next day, you know, it turns to poison. You can literally just see that. And so those are the type of activities that if you take a cold, hard, realistic look at them, you'll be like, this isn't something that I should invite into my life.
Sure.
But then you have something like discipline, like even just take exercise, for example. You know, it's hard to do in the moment. It's almost like poison in the beginning. But if you look at the effects of exercise, you know, your body stays healthy. You have more energy, you have more strength, you have more stamina to do anything that you want to do in your life. You know, the dividend of what it pays off is something beautiful and healthy and great. And so those are the type of things that you want in your life, even if they're hard in the moment.
It reminds me when I start to practice yoga. So I think 10 years ago, and the first class was very, very hard. I was not flexible at all.
Me too.
It was Ashtanga, and was really hard. But then, you know, you start to practice more and more, and it became more easier.
I mean, the word hatha, you know, you've heard of hatha yoga. It's a style of yoga. The word hatha means like hard or forceful or something that's like really hard to do. And, you know, if you just use that, even if you just took those 2 lines from the Bhagavad Gita and you put that as a new criteria in your life, for everything that you did, if you just looked at your life through the lenses of those 2 verses, like, is what I'm doing just something that's enjoyable in the moment, but in the end, it's going to lead to a more suffering condition for me? Or is this something that may be hard right now and I have to put a lot of time and energy and work into it, but in the end, it's going to really pay off with some great things that are going to come into my life. If you just looked at all of your activities that you did through the 24 hours of a day that you have, and you applied that criteria to your life, you would be much happier. Anybody would.
No, it's pretty logical.
Unfortunately, we don't do that. Unfortunately, you know, we live in a culture that doesn't value that. So it's very easy to manipulate people. I mean, you look at advertising. Advertising is 90% trying to get us to do things that are bad for us because other people can capitalize off of that. And so you really have to be sort of fixed in truth and health and wellness to just be able to kind of not be affected by that constant bombardment that we have through advertising and media that are telling us to do bad things.
No, that's for sure. No, that's great.
You know, here's something very interesting that I learned from yoga. You know, when I first started practicing yoga, I started doing it in physical yoga. You know, I would go to India and I would study bhakti yoga, more of like yoga philosophy and chanting and Krishna consciousness and, you know, kirtan and mantras. That was originally what attracted me to yoga was the bhakti yoga path, the non-physical path, the more meditational, kind of like theological part of the yoga tradition. And then later on, I started getting into, you know, the physical part of the yoga, the Ashtanga Yoga, the Hatha Yoga. And so I started taking classes in India. And in India, when you study yoga, or even if you study any discipline, it's almost like being in the Marines.
Really?
You have a guru, you have your yoga teacher. What he says goes. There's a tremendous amount of discipline that goes along with it. I mean, you know, I used to practice yoga in this ashram. It was like, okay, you want to practice yoga in this ashram? You have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You have to commit to doing hours of service every day. You have to commit to doing hours of yoga practice every day. And it was literally like being in the Marines.
Yeah.
And I had this one yoga teacher. He was like a guru. His name was Gopinath. And he was such an endearing person because he was so heavy, but he did everything with such love that you didn't mind him yelling and disciplining you, because you got that sense of like, this guy loves us. He has our best interest at heart, but he's just being very hard and heavy on us because he wants to see us kind of grow in life.
What's hard in what way? Like the posture?
Very demanding. He would yell at us. Sometimes he would hit us.
What? No.
Not hard. I mean, he's an old man. Okay. He's 70 years old, but he would come over and he would like, no, you do it like this. And he would smack us. You know, that
like
was just,
Yoda.
Yeah.
Like Yoda in Star Wars.
It was almost kind of funny, and it was almost endearing when he did it because it wouldn't hurt. But, you know, he would, that was just the kind of like, you know, it was like being in the Marines.
Yeah.
And so we would do, you know, you'd be practicing for hours. And he used to always say this thing, like he would be keeping us in postures for like, you know, 10 minutes, you know, warrior 2 for like 10 minutes. It would be exhausting.
Wow.
And he would say, stay off the mental platform. He would literally yell at us, stay off the mental platform. And he would, like, in a very angry mood, he would yell at us. And
but what do you mean that, like?
Well, it's funny because I didn't know what it meant. So after a couple of days of him yelling at me, you know, stay off the mental platform, stay off the mental platform, stay off the mental platform. Finally, one day after 4 hours of this, after the class, I went up to him. I was like, Gopinath, I don't even know what you mean. Stay off the mental platform. What does it mean? And he got very serious. And he said, I'm going to teach you. He goes, what? He goes, this is a very important question. And I'm going to tell you what this means. And this is one of the most important things in all of yoga, what I'm about to tell you. And if you can understand what I'm about to tell you, and if you can apply this in your life, this is going to be hugely beneficial for you. So you want to know what stay off the mental platform means?
Please.
He said that your mind is just a part of your brain that does two things. It accepts what's pleasurable and it rejects what feels uncomfortable. That's all your mind does, basically. It just, it bases things on the impressions that you've had throughout your life.
Yeah.
And according to all those impressions that we had throughout your life, if you do something and it feels pleasurable, the mind wants to accept it. You know, even something like drinking, it feels good in the moment. The mind says, accept it, accept it. And then it also, if things feel uncomfortable, if you're in warrior 2 for too long, your mind starts to say, get out of this pose. This is uncomfortable. He said, the only problem with that is there are things that feel very pleasurable to us, but they're actually horrible for us. And look at like
sugar.
Look at sugar. Look at heroin, just for an example. You know, people that have done heroin tell me that when you shoot heroin, it's like the ultimate high. I've never done heroin. I've barely done any drugs really. But they say, like, you take that needle, you put it in your arm, you press down the plunger, and it is almost like you're in this incredible state of being where just everything is blissful. It's like the most incredible high that you've had in your life. But look what happens from that. You destroy your life. You literally dismantle and destroy your whole entire life. And you become miserable for decades if you live that long until you clean that up out of your life, because it's super addictive. So if you're on the mental platform, things like drugs and drinking and alcohol and, you know, whatever else we use in society to kind of medicate our problems away, those things become very attractive to you. And the mind says, do these things.
Yeah.
And he says, likewise, when things are uncomfortable, the mind says, don't do these things. But there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable that are hugely beneficial for us. You know, even like exercise is just the tip of the iceberg. Even if you have to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody, a lot of people won't even do it. And then relationships become so strained because you haven't had these tough conversations for years. And finally things just like relationships break apart because there's no communication. So sometimes even something like bringing up uncomfortable topics can bring people closer together. But the mind says, don't do this. This is going to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
So if you can learn to get off the mental platform and master your mind and conquer your mind, then you're going to lead a much, much healthier, happier, more productive life. And it was a huge, great lesson to learn. And even like, you know, even today when I have to do something that's uncomfortable and I don't want to do it, but I know it's going to benefit me and it's going to benefit other people, I say to myself, stay off the mental platform and just do it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's been hugely helpful in my life. It can be hugely helpful in anybody's life. It's a universal truth. So remember that out there. Stay off the mental platform. If you're involved in things that feel good but are taking their toll on your life, conquer your mind. Don't do them. Avoid them. Stay away from them. Find people that, you know, what's hugely helpful about this is, you know, it's also, you know, people in recovery know this, that the company you keep is who you become. So if you're trying to stay away from drugs and alcohol and you're hanging out with people that are getting drunk and doing drugs all the time, you're never going to be able to do it. Go find more progressive people that aren't doing those things.
What about you? You have only friends that are straight edge, or you have?
It's funny because, you know, people have asked me about this, and it's not something cliquey and elitist or whatever, but every single one of my friends that I can think of is straight edge. A lot of, you know, my circle of like really good friends are straight edge, and they're very, very much into spirituality. And I seek out the company of those people because I want to become like those people. So I'm very wary of who I hang out with in a very intimate way. I'll hang out with anybody. I mean, I'm not like, you know, I try not to be like put up a wall between people and you know, be very, you know, be a person that's, you know, like an elitist kind of person that just won't open up to other people. I'm open up to anybody. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to anybody. But people in my inner circle who I really associate with in like an intimate way, no, I really don't hang out with many people that do a lot of drugs and do that because I don't want to become like that. So my inner circle, I try to find people in my inner circle that are way more evolved than me because I want to always become better.
Sure. People that inspire you.
Yeah. People that inspire me.
Oh,
and it's fun. And you'll become like those people. And you know, this isn't just this. This is a big principle in yoga, but a lot of people that are on a like progressive path in life, they'll be into this same philosophy. You become like the people that you hang out with. Businessmen know this, and it's funny too because they say that to find out your net worth of how much money you make a year, you take your 5 best friends and you divide their net worth and you take the average of their worth. And that's usually within $5 or $10,000. That's usually how much money you make. So businessmen know this principle. Like, you want to make more money, hang out with people that make more money than you. Hang out with really ambitious businessmen, and that kind of energy is going to rub off on you, and you'll start making more money. Even in a mundane sense like that of just trying to make money, that same principle is true. So what to speak of if you're not trying to, you know, if you are not valuing so much economic development, but you're you're more valuing spiritual development. You find people that are very spiritually advanced and you hang out with them. It's amazing. It works.
Yeah. And what do you think? Changing a little about the subject, because I think this is a unique, I don't know, time in our lives, because a pandemic is not every day.
It's incredible. It's a really unprecedented time in history.
What do you think? What do you think about it? What is happening in United States, in the world?
It's very interesting because Ray Cappo, who is the singer for Youth of Today, and he's also the singer for Shelter.
Yeah.
He has a podcast. His initiated name is Raghunath. So he's actually he's a very famous yoga teacher now. He's known worldwide. He does yoga retreats and classes and retreats all over the world. So he does a podcast that's called Wisdom of the Sages. And if anybody wants to listen to something interesting and spiritual, but also very, very entertaining and funny at the same time, this podcast is a great say. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning every single day, and I listen to this podcast 7 days a week, just because it's such a great way to start the day. You can listen live on Zoom, and then it's also on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Great. But check it out. I think you would really like it. It's called Wisdom of the Sages.
Yeah, I remember he did. I can't remember in what platform. Was like Yoga for Men.
Yeah. What was that? Do yoga with me or something? Yeah, that was great.
Do yoga? Yeah, something like that. But it was great because the way he explained things, and he's very practical. He knows how to talk to you.
At the same time, he's super charismatic and funny.
Yeah.
And so he makes all this kind of stuff that would normally maybe be very boring, just kind of come to life and be very entertaining. So it's a really great show. I highly recommend it. But anyway, getting back to your question, just this last weekend, there's one guru that I'm very, very fond of, and Raghunath is also very fond of. His name is Radhanath Swami. And he's wrote a couple of incredible books. He wrote a book called The Journey Home, which was his journey of hitchhiking from Europe across, the Middle East to India when he was like 19 years old. And he went to India and he met all these yogis and, lived in the Himalayas with these yogis. Really just fascinating story. The book is called The Journey Home by Radhanath Swami. And then he wrote his follow-up book was called The Journey Within. And it was like an introductory book about Bhakti Yoga. And it actually made the bestseller list for the New York Times. A very, very popular book. So he's a popular guru in India, although he's American. He's from Chicago. And so he was on this podcast. And a lot of the questions that they were asking him were, what do you think about this time that we're going through? What lessons should we learn about this pandemic? And a lot of his answers were very insightful, and they were directed towards, this is a time where nature is hitting the reset button. And even though so many people have become sick and so many people are dying, and the death toll has been very horrible, I don't want to take away at all from the severity of suffering that people have gone through, during this pandemic. And my heart, of course, goes out to those people. But if you look at, some amazing things have happened with nature. Yeah. Since all the
the pollution,
all the companies that have been polluting the earth for decades have been shut down, and no one's really driving, and no one's really doing all these things. It's almost like nature has sort of reset herself. And they said from India, where the pollution in India is just so bad in the cities, it's unbelievable. They have no pollution control. For the first time in decades, the smog has gone away, and now you can actually see like the Himalayan mountains for the first time in decades. So I think we're actually learning a hard lesson that the way that we've been treating the earth is such a destructive path. It's such a chaotic path. we're affecting ourselves through our own self-destruction. The way that we've treated animals has been so horrific and so cruel and so inhumane that we're getting a karmic backlash for that also. I mean, all these pandemics for the last 100 years, they're all directly related to they're animal-borne diseases that have been spread to humans through a lot of things like slaughterhouses. And this last coronavirus is directly linked to the wet markets in China, where things are just like so horrible and so just the amount of like dirt and disease that that comes from these markets where they raise and slaughter animals. It's just so unclean that people are getting sick from it. People are eating unclean foods and they're getting sick from the foods. People are eating bats. As ridiculous as that sounds, people do it. And I really think that if we're going to evolve as a culture, and I really especially, if anybody is a young person listening to this show, I beg you to take this seriously, because you're the future of this world. And it's like the mindset that the next generation of young people get into is really going to have a huge effect in the world. And we're really at a turning point now where if we continue down this road of environmental disaster, we're going to be seeing a lot of, death through pandemics, death through cancers. We don't even know what like 5G and 6G and all this thing is going to do to, human health. And I think we have to just I think this has been a time where we can sort of like take a step back, take a breath,
try to find a little balance,
and reassess like the way we've been living as a society, as a global community, is really causing a lot of suffering now. And so we have to rethink the way that we do things, and we have to get back to the earth. We have to understand that that animals are living, and because they're alive, there's a sacredness to that. The earth is also alive. There's a sacredness to trees. There's a sacredness to plants that we just can't come across. And clear cut rainforest, huge, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of rainforest. You want to know why people clear cut rainforests? You know who clear cuts the rainforest? Burger King, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken. They clear cut these, they clear cut this land and they raise cattle so Americans can have cheap hamburgers.
Yes.
It's
crazy.
It's crazy. It's actually insane.
But I think this is a kind of a reality check. Because we, for years, decades, centuries, we always think that humans were like on the top of the pyramid, like we were almost indestructible. And now it's like nature that, with a little tiny virus that shows that we are not in control.
We're not in control. We depend on nature, like they say, they have this term, Mother Nature. It's such a fitting term, because just as a child is completely dependent on the mother for its sustenance, we're dependent on this earth for our food, for our clean water, for our clean air. And we've just been on this path that we have completely disregarded and disrespected the earth, and it's to our own peril. And I think we're starting to understand that unless we really make some big changes, the coronavirus is just the tip of the iceberg. These things are just going to keep happening and keep happening. And the more that we pollute the earth, we're going to end up in a really horrible position that we've done to ourselves. So if you're young, if you're a young person that's out there listening to it, I beg all of you to stop eating meat, because that's one practical thing that you can do that will have huge environmental effects for the planet. it's one of the most positive steps that you can do to healing the earth and our relationship with the earth and the animals. Stop eating them. The meat industry is destroying the environment. There's more climate change caused from the meat industry than the whole entire transportation industry combined. I mean, it's ridiculous the way that the meat industry is destroying this planet. If you don't believe me, do a little bit of research on it. I mean, you know,
do you have any good documentary to share with
people? Tons.
I don't know.
Tons. You want to see a great one? Go on Netflix and look up Game Changers.
Oh, that was a good one.
Meat is not even good for you. You can be way healthier on a vegan and vegetarian diet, a plant-based diet. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is ridiculous. So the very thing that's causing our problem, he's keeping it open.
Yes.
I mean, the unsanitary conditions of these slaughterhouses is unreal.
Yeah. Can you explain a little about the measures in the United States?
I mean, here's the thing in the United States, you know, the slaughterhouses are, you know, we're feeling the effects of, you know, what it's like to be kind of cooped up in our apartments. You know, in America, there's like a really big lockdown. I don't know how it is across the rest of the country, but where I am in upstate New York, you're expected to stay inside. And like, if you go outside, it's really frowned upon. Like, you go outside to go to the supermarket, you go outside to go to the doctor, and you don't go outside for any other reasons. Like, you're just being an irresponsible citizen if you do that. And so everybody is just cooped up in their apartments. And, you know, it's funny when you think of like a slaughterhouse, you know, where like chickens they live their lives in cages, stuffed in cages with 50 other chickens. They can't even move. As a matter of fact, they go so crazy that they start attacking each other, to the point where now what slaughterhouses do is they cut off the chickens' beaks without any anesthesia, so they can't peck each other to death, because they're shoved in such close quarters with other chickens that it literally drives them crazy, and they start to attack each other. So they cut off their beaks so they may attack each other, but they can't kill each other, because they just don't care about these animals. They treat them so cruelly and so inhumanely. And guess what? When you live your life in such an unnatural environment, of course you get sick. These animals get sick from the close quarters, from the unnatural conditions, from the stress of just being shoved in with a bunch of other chickens in an unnatural way. These animals are really sick. So what does the slaughterhouse industry do? What does the meat industry do? They pump them filled with antibiotics just to keep them alive until they kind of get fat enough to be slaughtered. And people are taking in those antibiotics, and now people are becoming resistant to all these kind of like antibiotic strains, and people's healths are really breaking down because of it.
Yes.
And so it's almost like karma. Like, we're breaking down the health of the animals. Guess what? When you eat those animals, your health is going to break down also. So a couple of really important documentaries to watch. Game Changers is one that just came out a few months ago. Really eye-opening documentary about how meat eating actually destroys your health. And top athletes now are going vegan. They're going plant-based with getting incredible results. Incredible results. There's also Forks Over Knives, which is a documentary that was made by a couple of scientists. So if you really want to get down to the science of meat eating, what meat does to your body, watch that one. That's a really like eye-opening one. Another one that I like is Cowspiracy, because it was made from this guy who just kind of like, he was just a regular guy. And Cowspiracy, he wasn't even a vegetarian. He just kind of like heard about these things. So he just started to investigate it. And it's really cool because it comes from this perspective that a lot of people probably are kind of coming at it. You know, they've been raised to eat meat. They've always ate meat. They hear all these things that it's not healthy for you. And maybe let's just kind of look into it a little bit. And so it's probably interesting for people that are in that position to watch that documentary, because that's the exact perspective that it's coming from. It's really, that one's great. If you watch those three, I guarantee you will go plant-based.
I remember another that was Joaquin Phoenix was the I can remember. You know the Joker, the actor of
Joaquin Phoenix, yeah.
Well, he's a vegan. He's an activist. I don't remember if you. He made a documentary. He actually was relating he was the voice.
Wow. I haven't heard of it. I'd love to watch it. Yeah. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, but it's really kind of hardcore.
There's a lot of good ones out there. A lot of good ones. It's really cool.
Curlings.
What's it called?
You didn't know it? Curlings. I will share the.
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, I will.
Then again, I've been locked up in my apartment for months.
Yeah. Well, if you have the chance to watch it, it's pretty cool.
It was really cool because
there you go.
I have never seen it. Wow, looks amazing.
Yeah. But it's old. It's from, well, kind of old, 2004.
Wow, never heard of it. Have you seen it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not pretty.
A lot of these things aren't pretty. I mean, I remember
but it's effective. That's why I like it, a game changer, because was kind of a different approach. You know.
It was.
But no, it's cool. Well, me, I'm like vegetarian since, I don't know, like 20 years, maybe.
Great.
Yeah. But, we're more easy be vegetarian in Chile than here in France. Because in France, there's a culture of the food.
Oh my God, the French eat some really crazy ass stuff.
Yeah, like
stomachs and livers.
No, but the culture is really unique because they take food very seriously. It's not only to feed your body; it's like an experience. So someone can spend all day cooking, and he will present you the stuff like, please.
It's nice. India's like that too. India is a culture where food isn't just something that you scarf down standing up, on your half an hour break from your work. Food is a very big meditation, and it's also a way to show love to other people. And so, they take it it's a very sacred thing when your family or, people come together and they share a meal.
Are you call it prana? No?
What was that?
What is the name in Sanskrit of food?
It's called prasadam.
Prasadam.
Prasadam, vegetarian food that's cooked and offered with love to Krishna, to God. That food is called prasadam because the word prasadam means mercy. So it's like a meditation on gratitude. It's actually like a meditation on nature, that we don't make anything. We may plant things and we may put seeds in the ground. We may cultivate things, but you can't make a seed. You can't make an apple. You can't make it rain. You can't make sunshine. Like we're so dependent on these things that come from a higher power. That's probably the best words you can use. There's a higher power that kind of brings these things that sustains us in a very real way. And so in India, they take that very seriously. And so, they'll make food and they won't taste it. They won't smell it. They won't, they're not like the Italians where they lick the spoon while they're cooking, and they take that food and then they'll offer it to Krishna on their altar. And it's said that that food that's cooked with love and devotion for Krishna, in gratitude for all these gifts that come from a higher source, that energy of that love and gratitude actually enters into the food. And even Krishna's reciprocation with you for offering him that also enters into the food. So that food becomes very special.
It's like charged.
And it becomes surcharged with that love and devotion that it was cooked in. And so when you eat that food, that love and that devotion and that gratitude that food has been made with, you actually take that on. And really, according to yoga philosophy, the opposite is true too. When you kill an animal and that animal's filled with fear, and you mercilessly kill it and slit its throat in very inhumane and cruel ways, and then a person eats that, you actually take in that violence and that cruelty and that hard-heartedness, and it affects your heart. It makes you very, very hard-hearted. And we can see that, we live in a culture that are super hard-hearted to not only animals, but to other people. I mean, when you have a place like New York City, when there's a person suffering in the street and they're homeless and hungry, and you have a person who makes, $500,000 a year in their business suit walking over those people, there's something that's very, very hard-hearted about that. And our whole culture has become like that. And it goes back to even these basic things of how we nourish ourselves and how we feed ourselves.
And what do you think? Because I know that Bernie Sanders is not running anymore.
Yeah, I was really bummed because the person that was running was a person named Tulsi Gabbard, who's actually a yogi. She comes from a devotee family. She's a devotee of Krishna, and she's such a wonderful.
She's independent, or she's with a party?
She was on the Democratic Party. She was a Democratic nominee.
Okay.
But she's just such a wonderful, open-hearted, beautiful, progressive person. And she would have made such a great president. And, now we have this guy named Joe Biden, who was the worst candidate. The worst candidate. Like,
it's like the last election all over again, I think.
It's unbelievable because they had these democratic debates where they got all the people together, and here you have Joe Biden, who was the worst spoken person out of all of them. And somehow or other, he's the Democratic nominee, going against Trump. So great. Now we have Trump and we have this other, person who's not very qualified. It makes you just want to throw your hands up in the air.
Yes, it's crazy. It's like the last election with Hillary Clinton,
Yeah.
It was clear that people didn't like her, but they push it anyway, and now Trump is your president.
It's so discouraging because it makes you think that, if you have a person like Bernie Sanders, if he actually becomes president, a lot of really rich people are going to be affected by that because, you live in a country like America where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And believe me, these, people who make a lot of money, they're super powerful. And they lobby politicians. They throw a lot of money into campaign funding and things like that, and they're making sure that their businesses and their vested interests are coming first. And they don't pay taxes. You have Amazon.com that made some outrageous amount of money last year. They made like $30 trillion or something.
Yes.
You want to know how much money they paid to America in taxes? Nothing. They didn't pay $1 in taxes. How is it possible that
that's the price of freedom?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. If you just taxed Amazon.com, the way that you tax the normal everyday household person, you could have every single person in America have free healthcare.
Yeah.
You could have every student in America go to college for free.
Yeah.
But no, you have like these big, huge corporate interests, becoming outrageously wealthy at the expense of other people. I mean, it's really terrible. So Bernie Sanders wanted to change that. And, I think that these people these huge corporations and people that would be greatly affected by him, they don't want him, and so
of course they don't.
They lobby against him.
But I think also there's a kind of something that stays since the. I don't know. I'm not American, so you can correct me. But I think there's a kind of fear to socialism in America, like they related with something bad by default.
Yeah.
It's like
they call him a socialist, and they want to almost
like
paint him as a communist. I mean, it's all just fear. It's all just fear tactics.
Because here in France, you're a socialist is like, okay, you're a socialist, so what? But there in America, it's like an insult. Like,
yeah, I know. To look out for other people is and to want to treat all people fairly instead of just a few people reaping the benefits of the economy. It's a bad thing. I don't understand.
Propaganda also that is very effective.
I mean, one thing is when I don't take politics so seriously, because I think even historically, especially in my life, I can see that real change comes from individual people making a change in their own life. I mean, a lot of people, and this is a common misconception. People kind of like look out on the world and they think our economy is bad, our environment is bad. Let's elect politicians that are going to clean this mess up. And guess what? Change doesn't happen that way. Change happens when individual people realize that what I'm doing in my own life is contributing to this larger problem. So let me take personal responsibility for that and not do those things. Like, if you look out and you see that, first of all, if you're an environmentalist and you eat meat, I don't take you very seriously, because that number one thing that's causing the environment to be out of balance is this meat industry and this slaughterhouse industry and factory farming, and just the way that this food is produced is not even healthy food, and that we have to get back to like organic, locally grown, healthy, plant-based diets. Sure. If you're not understanding that, then what good is your environmentalism, and what good is the signs that you make, and what good is the megaphones and you're shouting all these slogans? You haven't even really made a big change in your own life. Your own activities are contributing to the very thing that you're against. So I think people have to be very, very sincere and say, okay, I don't like how the meat industry is polluting the planet. I'm just not going to eat meat anymore. I'm not going to buy those things that are keeping that industry in power. And that is very, very powerful. That is something that you can control. That is something that you can do. And when you start to shape your life in a way where you have integrity of how you want to see the world, you're living your life in that way as much as possible, then not only are you not contributing to these greater kind of evils that you see in the world, but also you become an inspiration to a lot of other people. Even if you don't go to a protest, and even if you're not, making signs and, shouting in a megaphone, people see what you're doing and they become inspired by your life, and they think, wow, look at what this person's doing. I want to try that. I want to be like them. Look at how healthy they're becoming. Look at the concern that they have for animals and the environment. The fact that they're making changes in their own diet. Let me try to do that. And that's how real change takes place. It's like a grassroots from the ground up. And I tell you, big business will sway to that. If you get enough people going vegan, enough people going plant-based, enough people, changing their diet.
It's already happening.
It is happening.
I don't know if you remember when you start,
when
you saw the evolution, it's crazy.
I mean, when I first became a vegetarian, you couldn't even buy tofu. There was only a few health food stores in all of New York City, and like you could barely buy you couldn't buy like, a veggie burger. A veggie burger was something that was very, very hard to come by. As a matter of fact, the first veggie burgers and like the first like non-cheese pizzas that came out, they were terrible. They're horrible. They taste like cardboard. But it's really super encouraging to me that just in a relatively short time, like a few decades, it went from being a vegetarian is weird, you can't even find tofu, to now you have places like Burger King with a vegan burger.
McDonald's.
That blows my mind. That's hopeful to me.
Yes,
that
of course.
that things are changing in the right direction.
It seems there's enough people that create the demand, so they are just they just want to make money. So
yeah, and I really have faith in these young kids, because I see like these new generations of kids, they're way more kind of conscious than kids of my generation. Although a lot of them are just being dumbed down by video games and distractions and, things like that. But hopefully they can get past that and really take on some of these tough issues that, are really affecting us and affecting the globe. And hopefully they'll make some big sweeping changes and the world will get better. Yeah, if you're a kid out there and you have any sort of inclination towards this, and you want to be part of the solution and not the problem, please start by just going plant-based. Change your diet. And a lot of this stuff, it's funny too, because in yoga, you were talking before about Ashtanga Yoga. So Ashtanga Yoga is like everybody's heard that. Like if you've gone to a yoga class, you've heard this term, Ashtanga Yoga. A lot of people know that means yoga, and they'll go to an Ashtanga Yoga class and they'll do down dog and up dog. But people don't really know what the Sanskrit Ashtanga means. Ashtanga means Ashta means 8, and Anga means like a part. So it means this eightfold path of kind of liberation or changing your consciousness from material to spiritual. And so the physical yoga that we do, which is it's only one part of this eightfold path. And before you're even supposed to start the physical postures and things like that, there's these 2 paths that are before it that are called Yamas and Niyamas. And these are actually the beginning of yoga, not just as an exercise, but yoga as a system to transform your consciousness. So the very first thing is these yamas, which are kind of like rules and regulations or ethics that you bring into your life that create a foundation for everything else that you do in your life. And the very first yama is called ahimsa. And so ahimsa means nonviolence. And specifically, it, like all the great masters and the commentators on the yoga tradition for the past, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, even Vyasadeva himself, who's the author of the Vedas, when he comments on his own work, and when he comments on the Yoga Sutras, is where this eightfold path of yoga is explained, they all say the same thing, that nonviolence doesn't just mean nonviolence against other people. It means nonviolence against all living beings. It means nonviolence against animals. It means nonviolence against the earth. When you're clear cutting the rainforest so that your business can make money, that's violence against the earth. And so the very first part of yoga is ahimsa, which and every single great teacher in the tradition of yoga has said this equates to vegetarianism. You have to stop killing animals for food. It's unhealthy, it's not necessary, and most importantly, it will affect your consciousness, because really we don't care about becoming economically developed, although in a sense that is part of society, and we do have to take care of our material needs. That's a requirement. It's not that we turn our back on that, But really, as people, the way that we want to evolve, it's not that we want to become the richest people in the world, because we can understand that doesn't even make us happy anyway. It doesn't make us better people just by having a big bank balance. But really what we want to do as a society is that we want to become better people. We want to become better-hearted people. We want to grow in our compassion and our kindness and our generosity and our looking out for other people. So if you're involved in killing animals, how can you grow in compassion? How can, like you're involved in a system that's pretty freaking merciless. So really, your square one, your first foundation of moving from being a hardened, hard-hearted materialist to becoming a spiritually evolved, loving person that recognizes the sacredness of all life. In the yoga tradition, the very first thing that you should do is you should become a vegetarian. You should practice ahimsa. You should recognize that all life is sacred, and that if I can move into a place where I can do less harm to people, then I'm going to do that. And that change of consciousness, that's like the linchpin for everybody to evolving into a better world. It's like, people are just kind of like cruel and uninterested and self-interested and selfish and arrogant and narcissistic. That's the real problem, because those type of people won't think twice about stepping over people and stepping over the environment and killing as many animals as they need to kind of like get their own situation better in life.
Sure.
And
what are your thoughts about the people that get more active trying to defend the environment, like animal liberation? Like,
I think it's fantastic. Although, if you're becoming a more hateful, like I know a lot of people that are that are animal rights activists.
Yeah.
And they love animals, but they hate other people. They hate people. They're very judgmental and angry, and they'll even fight other people. They'll physically assault other people. They'll blow up mink factories. They'll do this. They'll glue locks at the furriers. This isn't yoga. This isn't becoming a more loving, progressive, kind, caring person. You're actually part of the problem, because the problem is becoming hard-hearted. And if you're becoming hard-hearted towards other people in the name of animal rights, you're part of the problem. Your consciousness that you're in is the same consciousness that another person is that's killing animals. They're hard-hearted and they don't have compassion and they're unkind towards animals. Guess what? You're the same towards other people. I don't care if you don't eat meat. Really what we have to do is we have to have a change of consciousness. We have to come to the point of opening up our hearts and becoming more loving, kind, spiritually connected people, and recognizing that all of this comes from the same divine source, whether you call it God or Krishna or nature, whatever kind of name you want to put on that. When you recognize that we're part of a bigger picture and you want to reconnect, you want to again become connected to that bigger whole that you're part of, then things will change. Like if we can get people to that point, I think incredible sweeping change will happen. And I really feel like that barrier, that line that you cross to becoming vegetarian or vegan, going plant-based, that's a huge jump in consciousness for people.
Sure.
So young people, whatever your parents have fed you, they did it. Our generation was just hugely ignorant. The science is in now. Meat isn't even good for you. That chicken soup that your mother, made you when you were sick to get healthy, however well-intentioned with her, she was, that's actually going to make you sick. I remember my dad, who was probably one of the biggest media. I mean, he ate meat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He was like one of these old school Italian guys that just like that's what they ate. And
can you tell about your father? What he was? I don't know. What was his work or?
He was a well-to-do businessman. I'm not even, it's funny because I'm not even really sure what he did. He was some kind of businessman, and he made a lot.
Italian businessman.
Yeah. Well, his parents came from Italy. My grandparents came from Italy, and they became very. They were really the American kind of dream because they came off the boat from Italy with nothing. I mean, with like a few dollars in their pocket. And my grandfather worked 3 jobs, and he put himself through college and my grandmother through college. And they became pharmacists. And then he saved his whole entire life. He scrimped and he saved, and he opened up his own pharmacy. And it became like wildly successful. And then him and my grandmother ran this pharmacy. They made a lot of money. And then, doing that, my father grew up kind of wealthy, and he also went to college. He became a wealthy businessman.
Okay.
So, but so he, ate meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Sure.
And because of that, later in life, he started having incredible heart problems. I mean, what do you expect if you're going to eat, saturated fats every single meal? Guess what? You're going to have heart problems after a few decades. So he had triple bypass open heart surgery, where they go in and they scrape the saturated fats out of your heart. And he actually had to put in, they put in like artificial valves in his heart. I mean, it's like a big thing.
Wow.
And so after he got out of that surgery, I was in the room with him, and he was recovering. And my aunt walked in, his sister walked in. And she walked in, and she had a big bag of McDonald's with like a, whatever, like a, I can't even remember what they call those, but like a Whopper. My dad was an old man at this point.
No, but you?
I forget. I was probably in my 30s, maybe.
Okay.
And so she walked in, and she said, my father's name was Jim. She said, "Jim, congratulations on your surgery. I'm bringing you your favorite food. Here you go." And she kind of like lovingly handed him this big bag of McDonald's. And he was like, "Oh, thank you so much." And he hugged her. And it was like, in one sense, here's a very like loving thing to do. His sister, who loves him so much, brought him his favorite food. And then I'm like, are you crazy? Are you insane? This food that he's been eating for decades is what caused him to have this horrible surgery that's killing him. And you're going to give him this food? And they both kind of said, shut up. And and my dad opened the bag, and I just sit there and I had to watch my dad eat this 4 hamburger, Whopper or whatever, and like French fries. And it was hard to watch. People are just grossly ignorant about how food affects their health. And I think we're finally, after generations, getting to a place where, people are realizing that what they eat, has a direct result on their health. And it also has a direct result on the health of their planet, the health of the planet. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't even think about this stuff.
No.
Like, I just ate, and I just thought like, oh, hamburgers, they must be healthy. Like, my parents love me, and they're feeding me hamburgers. Bacon, bacon is healthy. Like, they taught you in health class that, you need meat, and you need eggs, and you need this, and you need that in order to be healthy. And it just was not true. It was actually misinformation. A lot of it was propaganda that was put out from the meat industry, that were the ones that were coming up with all this health material for your health class, came from the meat industry.
Yeah, it was like with tobacco in the 50s.
Yeah, I mean, in the 50s,
if you have enough money to put enough marketing and propaganda to make people believe.
I mean, in the 50s, you had cigarette ads with doctors.
Yes.
In the ads saying, how cigarettes were healthy, and I endorsed this cigarette, and I'm Dr. So-and-so. I mean, it was, again, it was like, it was gross ignorance. People in the 50s grew up thinking like cigarettes are great. They relieve stress. They have, like, they actually said there was health benefits from smoking cigarettes.
Yes.
And then, and, you know, then we finally figured, and then, you know, the science finally came in that cigarettes actually are killing you and they cause emphysema and cancer and this and that. And then cigarettes kind of like, and luckily a lot of people still smoke in America, but, you know, nowadays cigarettes are very, very out of vogue. It's not like the old days where you could smoke on planes and, like, you know, 80% of the population smoke cigarettes. Now it's much more looked down upon, and people realize that cigarettes are bad for your health. I'm hoping that in the future, meat is going to be a cigarette. Like, people are going to finally figure out that meat is super unhealthy for you, and people are going to start making big changes. And and you know, according to yoga, that's a big step spiritually. That's a big jump spiritually. When what, you know, and even like in a sense of karma, you know, there's a you know, philosophy in yoga that the energy that you put out, you get back. I mean, even in physics, you know, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's only transferred. So it's like, you know, that energy, you know, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's like a law of physics. So this takes place even in subtle energy. Like, the energy that you are putting out, that's the energy that you're going to get back. If you're a very loving, kind, generous person, you're going to get that back to you. So just by not eating meat, there's so much cruelty and so much karma that comes from just being involved in that system. Like, when you take yourself out of that, there's like kind of like a huge relief. And, you know, a lot of like great yogis even say that things like wars and pandemics and things like this, you know, these are actually like global karmic reactions that we get from treating animals in the earth so horribly.
And when you were starting in music with Youth of Today, and I guess sometimes you have to tour with bands that were not straight edge or not vegetarian.
Yeah.
How was on that time?
I mean, every show we play is in a bar.
So how was it? It was hard. It was fun. It was.
We liked it because, you know, we didn't want to just. I think one of the good things about Youth Today, one of the successes of Youth Today, is that I think we were very sincere about what we were doing. We were all straight edge. We were all vegetarian. We all really believed that there was great benefit to these kind of like lifestyle changes. We've had in our own lives, we had personally felt those benefits. So we were just kind of very sincere about going around and just like telling people like, hey, this really worked for me. Why don't you give it a try? It might work for you too. And, you know, so it's not like we just wanted to tell straight edge kids. You know, those kids were already straight edge and vegetarian. You know, we wanted to kind of tell everybody that, hey, you know, we used to kind of be like you, and we made these changes, and we've had great change, you know, personal changes in our lives, you know, positive changes. Why don't you try it?
And so what was the feedback of bands like, I don't know, Agnostic Front or Sikafito or?
One good thing about New York hardcore back then is that it was like one big family.
It doesn't matter if you were straight edge or not.
No. I mean, it was almost like punk and hardcore, and, you know, just in general, were such a small thing. And, you know, the neighborhood was so dangerous. I mean, like the Lower East Side, it was like a dangerous place to live. So we all kind of we were all into the same music. We all went to the same club, CBGBs. We were all seen as outsiders. It was a dangerous neighborhood. So we just kind of all packed together like a family. And it was very much like that. Like, everybody kind of looked out for each other, and everybody supported each other, and everybody supported each other's bands. And it didn't really, and there was such a diverse group of bands. You had like Warzone, were skinhead band. You like Sick of It All, were like a different kind of band. You had like youth crew type bands like Youth and Gorilla Biscuits. You know, you had Agnostic Front and the Cro-Mags, who were kind of like the elders of the scene. But, you know, everybody was very kind of, I must say, there was some magic.
There were no big egos.
I mean, there were kind of like colorful characters in the scene, but I think everybody really
respect each other.
There was a sense of family, that we're kind of all in this together. And it was almost like us against the world. And it really made the scene very, very tight and very dynamic and, you know, very creative. And it was a real special time to live through that time. I don't think it's like that in New York City anymore.
Yeah, I think the times are changing. But you have a nice, I don't know, a nice memory of that time.
I do. And I think if you ask anybody that was in this scene at the time what they thought, and they would be like, it was a really, really special time in our lives. And, you know, just like I said before, just because I'm straight edge, you know, I'm straight edge to better myself. I'm straight edge to, and if I'm straight edge and I'm becoming an elitist asshole to other people, then I'm not bettering myself. I'm making myself worse. So I think along with becoming straight edge, you have to have a healthy sort of tolerance and respect for other people that may not be like you.
Do you think that get lost a little with the new generations of straight edge kids, or?
I don't know. I think like,
or they are more tolerant.
I think you know, straight edge was big in the 80s. It was huge. Became very trendy and cliquey, and I think then in the 90s you had this era of straight edge becoming slightly intolerant, and straight edge becoming like looking down on other people that didn't live the lifestyle that they lived. And so I think you had those kind of like two extremes, and nowadays I think kids are just much more mature about it. You know, they've looked in the past at like the history of straight edge, and they've seen the kind of pitfalls and downfalls that people, you know, went through.
What do you think? Sorry, you continue. I interrupt you.
And so I think people have that kind of hindsight to look back on a scene, and I mean, and you know, realize the mistakes that other people made, and whatever, you know, we were just kids trying to figure it out.
Sure.
You know, we were kind of, you know, I'm sure we were guilty of that kind of mindset ourselves. Although I will say that, you know, for youth of today, very, very early on, we saw straight edge kids becoming like that, becoming very elitist and becoming.
Really?
Yeah, that's what the song Break Down the Walls is about. And when you think about when Break Down the Walls was written, it was written when the straight edge scene was just really kind of beginning. I mean, that record came out in like what, in like 1987 or something.
Yeah.
It was before the rise in popularity of straight edge. But I think Ray Cappo is just such a visionary that he was realizing that this is becoming a problem. Straight edge kids thinking that they're better than other people and looking down on other people and treating other people poorly in the name of self-improvement. And so if you look at the lyrics are, I used to think that labels are just symbols of pride, meaning putting an X on your hand and calling yourself straight edge. But over time, I see that I used to think that labels were just symbols of pride, but over time I see they only serve to divide. It's so easy to judge people by the way they seem to be, but we must overcome these judgments to live life peacefully, break down the walls. It was like a warning to straight edge kids, like to not be like that. Super way ahead of his time lyrics from Ray Cappo. I got to give him props for that.
Oh, of course. No, but I'm sure you have a lot of amazing histories from around that time. I can imagine what was at the beginning of going to those kind of shows, and I don't know, but it's great that now I think you're you're still touring with Shelter and Europe Today, or
yeah, we still tour pretty regular. I mean, we don't tour a lot, obviously. You know, we're all grown up, we have kids, and
of course
it's mostly Ray, or Raghunath, because he's such a successful yoga teacher, and he books his yoga stuff way in advance. Like, he'll have his whole entire year booked with all his classes and traveling and retreats and things that he does. Like, he books it for a whole year, and then there's barely any weekends to play shows. So usually when we play shows, we have to work around the schedule, and we have to book this stuff way in advance. So we do play, but not all that often. We'll play we'll maybe do 2 or 3 short tours a year.
And you're still composing?
Yeah, I'm doing a new band actually now. I want to write a new Shelter record. I want to write some new Judge songs. But I'm actually working on a new band right now, and it's sort of top secret, but it's coming out really incredible. So look for that later on this year. We already have about 8 songs written.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, I can't wait to listen.
Yeah, me too.
So I think you're a pretty busy guy, so we make almost 2 hours. So
wow, that went quick, huh?
Yeah, no, that's a good sign.
All right, you caught me during a pandemic. Usually I'm super busy, but I'm kind of stuck in my apartment. And it's funny because, the only person I really see is my daughter. So it's because I just really don't leave my apartment except to go to the supermarket. I mean, really, that's the vibe of where I live. It's like, don't leave your house. It's super socially irresponsible. So it's nice to, I teach a yoga. I teach a yoga class online, and I watch that podcast, Wisdom of the Sages, every day. But other than that, I really don't see other adults too much. So it's nice to talk to people and interact with people.
No, it was great. It was great. I really love your view of the world. I think you give some great advices and you share a little about your history. I would like to know more about all your stories when you were playing during that time with Shelter and Youth Today. But I think what you talked today was really, very deep, more meaningful.
All right, we'll do it again. We'll do it again sometime.
Sure. Great. So I really thank you.
All right, brother. We were supposed to play France.
Really?
I'm really bummed. We haven't played France in a really long time. We were supposed to play that festival, Hellfest.
No, really?
Have you heard of that? Hellfest?
It's a huge festival here in France.
It's huge. It's like one of the biggest rock festivals in all of France they have every year. Yeah. And Youth of Today was supposed to play this year, but it got canceled. And we were supposed to play some smaller club shows along with it too, and just everything got canceled. But hopefully we'll get to France one of these days.
Yeah, that will be great.
Yeah.
So, namaste.
All right, brother. Take care. Nice talking with you.
Yeah, really. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.